Maybe as we are waiting for a few other people to join, as you may see in the chat, Kyoko has shared with us a link to a very short poll that we invite you to fill in. It's a very short set of questions, just to understand a little bit the type of background that you have, because our session is aiming at discussing challenges and solutions regarding data collection. And the challenges may be very different depending on whether you are a sectorial expert or a policy expert and so on. So let's first check quickly what you are familiar with.
Do you want me to share my screen, Jerome?
Yes, you can.
Okay, sure. So we only have one response.
And I think it's me.
So you can find the link in the chat box.
Okay, so from what I can see in the short poll, so we have a good mix of people. The three of us are considered as modelers, and four are actually modelers or sectorial experts. So people really dealing with the data. So let's, if you don't mind, I suggest we take it as a starting point. So we will not be afraid to discuss the actual challenge of finding the data to put it in the tool and so on. And most of us have mentioned that historical data are the most difficult to gather. So then I would like to hear you a bit more in a more brainstorm way of discussion. So we know we need to find historical values for the different sectors, how much was consumed or how much was produced in the past for the different sectors. And then we need to look at the data for the future, like ambition levels, what could be future trends for production, energy consumption, and so on. So you seem to say that historical data are more difficult to collect. Could you please elaborate a little bit on that? Why is gathering historical data so difficult?
I'm happy to try and give that an answer. I don't think I don't think that means that future data is easy to collect. I just think that perhaps the consequences of getting it wrong with the historical data is perhaps more serious, because you're trying to sort of figure out what is actually going on, what has been going on, and yeah, I mean, especially so I work mostly at the sort of city level, not at the national level, but yeah, sort of getting a picture of what's already happening, even just in something like residential energy, has always been a huge challenge, especially in developing South countries and cities. And yeah, the information is just simply not available, or it's very sort of scattered.
Thanks, Stephen. Any reaction to that? Canisia or Francis, you raised your hand.
Okay, yeah. From my side, mostly because I also work with the industries in terms of collecting their data and wanting to understand how their sector behave. The first challenge is that, firstly, these industries have got challenge in keeping data themselves. So for us to get the data that we require, it's not easy in that sense. And then secondly, we also assist our local municipalities and also the provincial municipalities in terms of developing their greenhouse gas inventory. So for us to get the data that we need, mostly for the energy sector and the Afulu sector, it's really difficult to get the historical data. So yeah, thanks.
I was really interested in the presentation given by the team in India, the level of discrepancy in some of the data that they had tried to collect, the figures on the slide. So for coal usage, for example, I think the discrepancy was one data source was suggesting half of what another data source was suggesting. So just going through that and reconciling that is a big challenge.
Francis, I think you raised your hand earlier.
Yes, Jerome. Hello, everyone. In our case, since I work with energy, there is data. We do have rich data, but like what Stephen earlier mentioned, we are also encountering challenges specific on residential energy efficiency data. The Philippines just recently passed the law on energy efficiency and conservation, so we are starting to initiate the mandatory gathering of the sector-specific data for efficiency. So I think by next year, we will probably establish a baseline. I think my colleagues also dealing with the AFULU and even the transport are quite challenged to find some historical data. But for future data, we do have the outlook, so there can be some level of confidence in using this projected or outlook data. But another concern that we were discussing in our group was how do you set those data that's specific for the level 3 and level 4 version? Because in our case, what we did is to synchronize the level 1 and level 2 data based on the scenarios of our outlook specific for energy. So thank you.
So it means that talking about historical data, we agree that there's a challenge of granularity, discrepancy between different sources, and so on. But do we agree that the challenge of the calculator to bring this data together is an added value by itself? So fixing or highlighting these discrepancies and checking the data is a clear added value in itself, right? Beyond the other features of the calculator, I mean.
So you're suggesting that the calculator then becomes a accurate source of historical data in itself that other users could go to?
That would be maybe a little bit ambitious, but at least in my opinion, and what we have seen in different countries when supporting different countries is the fact that we show what are the problems with the data sometimes helps administrations, for instance, to fix it or to start working on it. Which, but it's true that it's a large part of the calculator development, and sometimes it's a bit too large. And that's why personally I have highlighted the future data as the most challenging, because I know that we spend a lot of time on the historical data. Then we have quite only a very limited time for the future data and the ambition levels, which is why sometimes we don't spend enough time on it and we don't go and look for real new breakthroughs or real high ambitions in the different levers. And in the end, we sometimes miss a little bit one of the key aspects of the calculator, which is to explore scenarios that are a little bit out of the beaten tracks. And that's the problem. And Francis, correct me if I'm wrong, but if for the future ambition, we only rely on existing scenarios, then we may have a problem. Do you agree with that or not? We have 5 minutes left, so maybe we can have a short wrap up thinking about this from each of you.
I have to agree, Jerome. It can be a bit of a challenge if you peg the ambitions based on what you have as projected. But another point of discussion that we had in our group was if we are to set certain figures for level 3 and level 4, then this must have a basis because as much as possible, we do want to quantify an ambition that you have a basis for because our principals or our policymakers would then get back to us and ask what is your basis for this. But I think there has been a workaround on this as working with Modmac and Climax, they're suggesting for us to also consider looking at what Malaysia did. So in the Philippines case, we are trying to look at what Malaysia did and probably adjust our calculator based on what they did because of certain similarities between our countries.
Thanks. Canisia, what's your view on this?
We only have less than 2 minutes.
Okay. Francis, you want to have just one wrap-up view on this?
I think what Vietnam shared earlier, one of my colleagues got it. So in their presentation earlier from their lessons learned. So I think it's a good input for us, especially to address some of the challenges that we are facing, especially on the specific. So it was a learning point for the team and for us working on the project.
I'm now sharing my screen with a few lines that I suggest to present to the plenary as a wrap-up session. Please tell me if you see something wrong or missing. But the idea is maybe to highlight a few of the things you mentioned.
Oh, Johnny, go ahead. We have less than 1 minute.
Yeah, I can see the countdown there. No, I'm just going back to your previous point about not spending enough time on ambition levels, Jerome. I think I completely agree. And also future scenarios in some sectors change so fast. So take the hydrogen economy in the UK at the moment. Projections for it at the moment are far more ambitious than they were even a few years ago. So yeah, more time on future data collection is a very valid point.
If I may just add with the historical data, I think base year is really important at this stage, so that the country knows which base year has the most data to get from. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jerome.
Yeah, you're fully correct. And this is often a challenge with the